Well, there's all sorts of news for my Detroit Tigers. First of all, I need to reveal that the brunch heard around the world last week with AJ Hinch and Carlos Correa did not lead to Carlos Correa signing with the Tigers yet, yet. Which is a ridiculous thing to say. But the piece of news that did come out is that AJ Hinch had a ham and cheese omelet at that brunch. So my fears were confirmed. I was worried about the photographs of Carlos Correa. I didn't like his body language. He seemed to have his arms folded. He was leaning backwards in his chair. So clearly, I underend things.
He was doing a lot of this when Hinch was talking, just moving.
They were flipping each other off.
Okay, AJ.
My astute observations proved to be correct, as he was not signed by the Tigers, unfortunately or fortunately. Carlos Correa is not signed anywhere, so he's going to be the speculation of the winter, as he's the top free agent prospect out there. So we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, over the offseason. But that ship has sailed. Apparently, there's nothing to say that the Tigers couldn't sign him in addition to the big free agent signing they had, as we've seen the insane Texas Rangers sign Marcus Semien and Corey Seager, taking two of the top five shortstop free agents off the market and putting him into their middle of their infield. But the Tigers did sign Javy Baez, and we talked about it briefly in previous episodes, how that was a rumor that might happen. You actually texted me a couple weeks ago that it may have been a done deal, but I
knew it was a done deal. I had sources.
You were a week early.
I said to you, enjoy your reunion. When you said, "Where I can't find this anywhere," I'm like, trust me, it's happening. I know.
You were prescient. Yeah, your comments were prescient. I think you were about 4 to 5 days early on that, as it became official that the formerly sleepy Avila is. I think we have to bury that nickname forever now, because he's been one of the more aggressive general managers in this month. Or maybe this is just he just had his coffee. I figured out his regimen needed to change to give him some energy for this 1 month, and now he's spent, and that's it. As he jumped on, made the first transaction right after the World Series, picking up Tucker Barnhart. He added Eduardo Rodriguez, which is being pretty much universally acclaimed throughout Major League Baseball as a really shrewd maneuver and a potentially really smart move for the Tigers rotation going forward. But he finished his 3-item checklist that he stated before the offseason started, that he needed to address catcher, starting pitching, and shortstop with Javy Baez. And there's a lot of thoughts about Javy Baez. You and I obviously know Javy Baez probably more than most typical Tigers fans, just because I lived in Chicago for 24 years and watched Javy Baez grow up a mile from where I lived, just north of Wrigley Field. So we know about Javy Baez a lot more than typical Tiger fans. And I've seen some of that ignorance play out on Sports Talk Radio in Detroit this week after the signing became official, as people more or less familiar with Javy Baez were perceiving him as a clubhouse cancer, which I found hilarious that term had been used to describe Javy Baez, because I had never thought of him that way. As the Cubs were a merry bunch of kids growing up, winning a championship early. Obviously, they didn't win multiple championships as we would all have liked to, but you heard little things here and there, how there may have been maybe two separate camps in that locker room last year, with Wilson and Javy being on one side, and maybe Bryant and Rizzo being on another side. But I never thought of Javy as a cancer. Did you ever think? I mean, you've got a more of a less biased perspective, being a White Sox fan, but did you ever think Baez was a cancer? Is that a way to describe him?
No, except for to what you just pointed out. The first rumblings kind of happened when he had made those comments that basically only him and Contreras were showing up to play and no one else was. And I was like, we were all kind of like, what are you talking about? and sort of the whine. I don't. This doesn't fall under cancer, but the whining in the 2020 season about not having fans, and then some of the shit in New York. Yeah, well, and the shit in New York too. So
this is where I think the perception is coming for in Detroit is what happened in New York. And what happened in New York was the famous, the thumbs down sign to the fans, which he actually had done in Chicago, but it didn't come to any. It wasn't a news story because it's not New York, and it wasn't a big deal because everyone loved Javy in Chicago for good reason. So that incident, and mainly because Javy came out and talked about it in a press conference afterwards and just told people what he was doing, which we talked about at the time was fucking stupid. I mean, it's an honest moment, but why you don't have to tell people what's going on. He was just they were upset that they were getting booed by Mets fans, and that was their sign to boo back, which whatever. I think that's more immaturity than anything, but that's being perceived now as a clubhouse cancer, which I just think is vastly, vastly overstated. So the other part of that incident that's being described in Detroit, where he gave the thumbs down, is the premier morning talk show, Detroit Sports Talk Radio, and I know 7 won the ticket, Stoney and Jansen. They were describing that as Javy flipping off the crowd. And they said it multiple times, like, "Oh, yeah, they flipped off the crowd, so he's a clubhouse cancer." It's like he gave him a thumbs down. We're talking, minor semantics here, but there's a big difference, I think, between giving fans a thumbs down and literally flipping them off. So I find it funny how that suddenly this is escalated where he's a cancer and flipped off the crowd. So he's like the worst guy in the world, which is I think it's just lazy journalism. That's lazy sports talk radio. Mainly, I think people in Detroit at least are a little bit disappointed simply because we all thought we were getting Carlos Correa. And I've been connecting those dots.
I blame you.
Yeah, it's my fault. I mean, everyone's listening to us too much. I started that. I mean, I didn't create the idea, but we started talking about this summer, how Carlos Correa made some sense for the Tigers to go after in the offseason. And then as things progressed, it looked more and more likely, including that famous brunch 2 weeks ago. So I think that's part of it. I think people were really, really on board the Carlos Correa decision, felt like we had to settle for Javy Baez, which there may be some truth to that. But I think it's a little immature, very unfair to start calling him a clubhouse cancer and all that stuff. What is fair is to point out his incredibly high strikeout rate. If we want to talk facts here instead of perceptions, and
he's a strikeout cancer, folks, not a clubhouse cancer.
That's a good way to put it. Strikeout cancer. Yeah, he strikes out a shit ton. That's a problem. And that's where Carlos Correa would have been a better option, at least in one statistical category. There are more, but the thing that Tigers fans and myself immediately need to keep in mind is Javy Baez is a massive upgrade to what the Tigers had at shortstop. And he is filling a huge need in their offense and specifically defense. This team is being built around defense and pitching and supplementing with offense. And in many ways, Javy is a fantastic fit for that. Not to say he's the best fit. I think I still would like Carlos Correa a little bit more, but I understand why they didn't. He basically costs half as much for almost half as many years as Carlos Correa is probably going to. If you look at how this market has played out, Corey Seager got his 10-year deal for $325 million from the Rangers. Well, that's the starting point for Correa, who is perceived as the better player. So we speculated weeks ago that basically the rule of thumb was going to be 10 years, $30+ million. Well, that's come to fruition now, where that he'll look at that 325, and I think it's going to be, like we said, 342 million, just to be 1 million more than Francisco Lindor, just because Carlos Correa can, as the market is shrinking. The shortstops are coming off the board. I think there's a lot of value in what Javy Baez brings, though. If you look at the other signings this month, specifically the shortstop free agents, Marcus Semien got a 7-year deal for 175 million, I think.
Yeah.
So Javy is less than that. He's half as much as what, much less than half as much as what Corey Seager got, and I'm not sure how much better Corey Seager is than Javy Baez. So I think what you're gaining in Javy Baez is certainly defense, certainly power. I mean, that is his. He had 31 home runs last year. On base percentage is not where you're getting, although he has turned that around in New York for those last 2 months. He was a 377 OBP, where he was around 300 for his career, and the first 4 months of 2021. So maybe he's addressing that in a new organization, and we'll address that going forward. I don't know. But regardless, like I said, he is a massive upgrade for the Tigers. He might not be exactly what we wanted. He's not Carlos Correa. I think there were some pitfalls to Carlos Correa too. That you can poke holes in any player. So he doesn't have the power potential that Javy Baez does. Or at least he has never hit more than 25 home runs in a season, I don't think. He has had injury issues, which Javy has actually had some minor issues that have kept him out from games, but not for significant amounts of time. But so there's things to look at there. But I don't think Tigers fans should be disappointed at all getting Javy Baez, which is just funny. I never thought I'd be even saying that sentence, that people would be disappointed to have Javy Baez on their team. Just think about what we've experienced in Chicago with El Mago. There's a reason his nickname is that. His baseball IQ is off the charts, and that's the immeasurable part that doesn't show up in a statistical analysis. But we've marveled at the things he's able to pull out of his ass on the base paths and other places. So he's an incredibly exciting player. It's amazing that he went from my second favorite team to my first favorite team in the span of a year. I never anticipated that happening, but I think it's just going to be a matter of time before people grow to love Javy Baez the way Cubs fans have. I'm sure you have some thoughts as you have been observing Javy Baez. We've been comparing Javy Baez to the shortstop on the south side of town with Tim Anderson. We've compared their strengths and weaknesses. I know you have some thoughts, as Javy is a polarizing figure in some terms. So
yeah, I mean, I think you get the good and the bad with Baez, and he has way more mental lapses than a player of his caliber should. From time to time, it's amazing where you watch him make the hardest play imaginable in the field, and then 2 innings later, a routine grounder goes between his legs or something.
Yeah, in a focus issues.
Yeah, in a key moment, or he's running on the base pass with 1 out on a fly out and getting doubled off the base. So it's, I mean, the thing about it is, you would have thought by now, with as long as he's been in the majors, the strikeout rate and some of these other issues would have dissipated, but they continue. Now, was it the Cubs? Was it being with Grandpa Rossi and just being with an ex-teammate? Was it Joe's friends with everybody mentality there? I don't know.
Well,
Javy letting Javy be Javy? I don't know what it is, but I mean, if I'm a Tigers fan, he gets a clean slate as far as I'm concerned when he walks in the door, because he's under a very good manager who did some amazing things with the Tigers this past season. The Tigers overachieved by every aspect. And while AJ Hinch was a stretch for a Manager of the Year nomination, to me, he could have. I wouldn't have said, why is AJ Hinch nominated for Manager of the Year?
Right.
The Tigers exceeded expectations, and like I pointed out before on a Manager of the Year candidate, I think that isn't considered enough when Managers of the Year are chosen. So, but whatever, it's just some silly freaking award at the end of the day. We know what our managers did and what they were up against. So the defense. I'll just continue on this. The defense, the things Javy does. There's no better person tagging out a runner at frickin' second base on shitty throws.
Mm-hmm.
Like Wilson Contreras, part of Wilson's going forward is going to be when he throws an errant throw to second now. Are those going to still, those probably aren't going to be outs anymore for the Cubs that they were with Baez. Baez's glove is quick. And again, I think there's more good than bad at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But we're in a society where when the bad happens, that's all you're going to hear about. So, and because we're assholes on this podcast, I'm going to point it out probably over and over again just to have fun with this podcast. But, I mean,
I would expect nothing less.
I mean, honestly, the other thing that's always, and I think maybe it's Baez is the type of guy you kind of love to hate because of how he carries himself on the field. He does have an arrogance and I think he was
confidence, but
well, but I think they go hand in hand. I think if he's on your team, you kind of love him. I think if you're going up against him, you think he's showboating and being an asshole. So
I think that's only going to get ramped up for White Sox fans if they've been witnessing from afar. But now he's in their division, as the rivalry between the Tigers and White Sox is definitely going to ramp up, as I think we are headed for a battle for the AL Central for years to come now.
Yeah. So, it'll be fun. But
age is another issue with Baez that we didn't bring up yet. That he is 29 years old, where Correa was like 27. But Tiger fans are really scared of long-term deals. This is a 6-year deal, $140 million. Mainly because of Miguel Cabrera's massive 8-year extension signed 6 years ago. And we've seen him he had a good year last year actually, but he's been a shell of his Hall of Fame self. So people are nervous about that. But Baez is going to be 35 years old at the end of this deal. Miguel is going to be 40 or 42, depending.
Yeah, you're talking a very big freaking difference.
Yeah,
it's a good signing, and just to your point about the upgrade at shortstop, that a good defense brings good pitchers. Good pitchers want to come pitch on your team. Free agent pitchers want to come to your team. It was kind of like what I brought up about the Giants, which we'll get to after we take a break. But, I had expressed concern. Were the Giants going to have trouble signing some pitchers because Buster Posey was gone?
Yeah,
there was a veteran catcher that pitchers wanted to work with because he was going to make them even better, possibly. But the Giants have a pretty decent defense. But that all comes into play. People don't think that, but people don't look at the game like that. They don't. They just say like, "Oh, well, we missed out on this pitcher." Well, maybe you missed out on the pitcher. Maybe no one ever talked about. I didn't talk about it, but maybe some of those big signings, the White Sox, where they put similar money out on the table for those big name pitchers, they looked at how the White Sox defense was, and they're like, hey, we don't want to go sign with the White Sox. We want to go where there's a better infield and a better outfield behind me. So.
I think it was definitely a factor in signing Eduardo Rodriguez, who suffered from the worst defense in the majors in Boston
for the
last couple of years. So, anywhere was an improvement, but the emphasis that Detroit puts on defense has certainly got to be appealing. The other thing that may, to recruit Javy at least, Miguel Cabrera was a clear factor. That was one thing I need to talk about, where he Javy reached out to Miguel to see if it would be a good idea to come there, and apparently he said, "Fuck yeah, get your ass over here." And I think that was a big factor in Javy signing, because like we talked about, there was, when those rumors first came out, it's like, he might be interested in coming to Detroit if they offer him the most money, but there's no connection. I think of Javy as kind of a big city guy. Obviously, he's played his career in Chicago and New York now, but a spotlight guy. Where they just didn't seem like a normal fit for Javi in Detroit. Is, you know, clearly Detroit's the working class Rust Belt. Just get to work, get your job done, win some fucking championships, and we'll love you. But I think he can fit in. I think Miguel is a big part of that too, which is fun to see. Like Miguel using his status as, you know, in a recruiting way for the Tigers. So I love it. Last thing I have to bring up with Javi is he is wearing the number 28 they revealed yesterday, which is a special number in recent Tigers history, as not only Curtis Granderson, one of my favorite Tigers of all time, wore the number 28, Prince Fielder wore the 28 and had very good years in Detroit. And of course, JD Martinez, who had his best years of his career, maybe, in Detroit, wearing the number 28. So I think that's another good sign for the Tigers going forward.
Word Hole Media.